Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video, I'm bringing to you my spoiler-free review and spoiler-filled discussion of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, which is the first book inside the series. Now, this is not the first time I've read this book. I've read the first two books inside the series as audiobooks 5 to 6 years back and I liked both of them back then. But for some reason, I did not continue on with the series. So I decided to read the entirety of the series this year and I'm rereading the first two books so that I can recollect my memories of the series properly. In this video, I'll be giving a spoiler-free review for this first book in the first few minutes, and after that I'll get into the spoilers for the book. I'll give you a spoiler alert before I start getting into the spoilers so that if you don't want to be spoiled for this, you can skip away from the video, and if you have read the book just like me, you can stay on and discuss it along with me. So without any further ado, let's get into the video right away. Starting with the plot, in this book we follow our main character, Feyre, who's living in this world where the entire landmass is divided into two parts, as one for the mortals and the other for the fairies or the fae folk. And since Feyre is a human being, she is living in the mortal half of the world, and she is also taking care of her family, which is comprised of her two elder sisters and her father, who has his legs shattered because they used to have a lot of wealth before, but because of some reasons all their wealth dissolves, and due to some of the debts that her father has, he is beaten up and his legs are shattered and stop working completely. Of the three sisters, Feyre is the one who's capable of running the family and taking care of all of them, and there is also an additional reason that Feyre made this promise to her mother in her deathbed that she will take care of the family after her death. So in order to satisfy that promise, as well as to take care of her own family who are not that much independent on their own to take care of themselves, Feyre does some stuff, and one of these things that she does is hunting. She's a huntress, and one day what happens is she goes to the forest, which is on this borderland between the fairyland and the mortal land, and in that forest she ends up hunting a deer and a wolf. And of these two, the wolf turns out to be a fairy in disguise, and due to this, an agreement between the fairies and the human beings has been broken that neither of the two people will kill a person from the other group. Since Feyre has ended up killing a fairy, one of the other fairies, who's a high lord, comes to Feyre's house and takes her away from the mortal lands into the fairyland. Now this fairyland is called Prythian, and after she gets into Prythian, she is taken to this place called the Spring Court, and the person who's the fairy that has abducted her from the human world into the fairyland is actually the High Lord of the Spring Court, and what all happens between Feyre and this High Lord named Tamlin is the actual plot of this book. Moving on to the characters, most of the story focuses just on Feyre and Tamlin, who's the High Lord of the Spring Court inside Prythian, and the things that happen between Feyre and Tamlin are the major chunk of the book, which is about the middle 50%. The rest of the book has a lot of things to do with all the other characters inside the series. But of all of them, Feyre and Tamlin are the people whom we concentrate on the most, and more than Tamlin, I should say that Feyre is our main focus here from the first page to the last, because we follow the story as it happens to her, and each and everything that is revealed to Feyre is shown to us as the story. And when we see pieces of the story that are being experienced by Feyre when she is inside the fairyland, they don't make that much sense, but all of them, when coordinated together, when the plot progresses on, is really well done. Many people think that Feyre is a very whiny character and she's not that suitable for a main character inside the series, but I'm totally against that because I thought Feyre was done really brilliantly by Sarah J. Maas in this one. She's a person who's just 16 to 18 years old, and when a person has that much responsibility of a family on them, it is definitely going to make her put herself as a priority only after the family which she's taking care of. And when a person is like that from a very young age itself, there are so many things that will happen to them which will stop making them care about themselves more. I think that was really well used by the author in this one. And apart from all these traumatic stuff that is going on in Feyre's life, she also has this passion towards painting, and each and every point of the story just revolves around Feyre alone, and how she sees the world as an artist, as a painter, is reflected in the writing of the author, which makes the writing of the author as well as the main character go hand in hand with each other. And people thinking that Feyre is just whiny and horny is not that much of a true statement if you ask me. It is just the internet hype which tries to always put characters into boxes and say that this is just a typical young adult character or new adult character. But conversely, I think Feyre also has a ton of other layers to her character which don't show up that much often inside the story. But I don't think we cannot consider that as a fact to exclude all of those traits from her character. Now moving to the world building, which is my most favorite part about this book in specific, because the author has this great tendency to build this world within just a 400-page book. There's so much that happens with the plot and the characters. At the same time, the author does not also give up on building the world and presenting it as a completely different, new and lush one in front of our eyes. Since this is a story that happens inside the fairylands, it must be majestic, it must be fantastical, and at the same time it should have traces of darkness that are woven throughout it. And I think the author hit each and every mark when it comes to exploring all those things inside the world building of this particular book. Since it's also the first book inside the series, it has a lot more responsibility to draw us inside this world and make us feel how this world is and how these people are living in this world. While doing that, the author has done a great job of dividing the world into two halves, as I said before, for the mortals and the fairies, and dividing the fairy world also into 7 different codes. One code for each and every one of the 4 western seasons, namely spring, summer, autumn and winter, and 3 codes for 3 times of the day like dawn, day and night. Apart from these 7 codes, there's also this other chunk of fairyland called the Highburn, which is kind of this island that is specific for the fairies alone. And the world building aspect of this book does not just end with the fact of its geography and showing us the different kinds of lands that are available for the people who are existing inside this world. She also gives us just the enough amount of history that is required to make us understand the scope of this world and why these characters and why these fairies are behaving the way they do towards the other people. She gives us the history of Feyre and her family. She gives us the history of Tamlin and his court. She gives us the history of the entire fairyland and all that has happened in terms of politics between Highburn as well as Prythian, and how the fairyland as well as the mortal land have been in kind of a tug of war ever since the start of time because of various reasons, and the inherent darkness of the Fae that has been inherently shown to us at each and every point inside the story. It doesn't matter whether we consider a fairy character to be positive or negative inside the story, each and every one of them has a really dark shade to them, and the author also makes sure to show us that dark shade and make us understand that though these people are good, they are Fae and this darkness is just a part of them. In order to understand them better, we need to accept the fact that they have this darkness inherently within them, and she has used it beautifully in order to show the darkness of this world as a whole. Now moving on to the writing, which I personally think is the strongest pillar for this book. Okay, as I said before, this is not my first time reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. I have listened to the audiobook before this one, and I should say I had the exact same kind of feelings just because of the writing of the author both the times that I have read this book. And that single feeling which I could easily zero into and say that this is what I felt while I was reading the book is that it felt super cold. Okay, the writing of the author is so atmospheric and so powerful that it is not so descriptive, at the same time just enough descriptive to make you feel how this place is and puts you into that place and makes you experience all the things that these people inside that place are experiencing. I am a person who usually likes atmospheric writing a lot because I want to feel the place where the story is happening, especially when it comes to fantasy books. And in this book, I was able to feel each and every space that the story was happening in, be it a forest, a snow-covered land, a dungeon in which the main character is trapped in, the fairy court with the fairies dancing around, a rich aroma of the various kinds of fairy food that is available with the smell of them wafting through the air. I was able to feel each and every one of those things just because of the right amount of description that this book had without boring me as a reader. While doing all these descriptive things, she also does not make the story boring in any way because her prose is really beautiful. At the same time, it is super easy to read. Sometimes what happens is when the prose is super beautiful, it becomes a bit more tedious as a task for a reader to go forward and enjoy the beauty of the words, at the same time read it fast. But in this book, I did not face that problem because I was not just enjoying the beauty of the words but also able to read it fast without experiencing any kind of disconnect between the reading process, at the same time experiencing the story as a whole. Another important aspect about the writing which I'd like to say is how she made the writing of the story or the narration of the story reflect the main trait of the main character Feyre, which is being a painter properly. Okay, from the first chapter to the last, we keep on seeing the story as a painter would see it, with colors just splashing here and there. The way in which the author describes the sky, the forest, the leaves, the snow, the animals, the different kinds of fairies that she sees, along with the splashes of color that she uses while describing each and every one of them, seem like a great overlap between the character trait of the main character and the writing of the author reflecting this character trait. So I think of all the things inside this book, the best part is the writing and my most favorite part is the world building. Finally, in the spoiler-free section, I want to talk about the pacing of this book. Okay, this is not a consistently paced book in any way. I'm a person who does not want all of the books that I read to be fast-paced and just action-packed. I am okay with slow books, and this one was kind of off-putting for me because the first 20 to 30% of the book is kind of fast and it is smoothly paced. It is not so fast, not so slow. It just keeps you on the edge of the seat and makes you wonder when you're going to get into the fairyland and start exploring that part of the story. And the next 50% of the story is where the pace lands a bit for me because we spend all this time just inside the spring court and experiencing all the things that Feyre is experiencing for the first time inside the fairyland along with her. And most of these just feel like everyday happenings inside that place, even though the author hides in a lot of plot points within that 50% of the book which are explored later on inside the story. Despite it being done like that, I felt like that 50% of the book dragged a little bit for me because that's where a major portion of the romance between the two main characters in the book also happens. I'm also not a huge romance reader or romance lover, so that might be a reason why I felt like that 50% of the book dragged a little for me. If you're a person who likes to read slow brewing romances in books, I'm sure you will enjoy that section of the book also. And the last 30% of the book was super fast paced. It was totally action packed, and all the plot points that were hidden in the 50% before inside the book were just revealed and made use of properly in the last 30%, which just made me wonder how much plotting must have gone behind the scenes for all these things to crystallize towards the climax of the book. There's so much talking that is done between the characters in that 50% of the book which I felt like it dragged a bit, but all those conversations are important and necessary in order to move that last 30% of the book in that faster pace. So even though the pacing was not consistent throughout, I think it needed to be so in order to make us feel the story completely and give us enough breathing space to get all those plot points without, suffocating ourselves while reading. So as a whole, I'd say even though A Court of Thorns and Roses is not the best book out there, I think it's a really solid and good start for a series. And if you're someone who's having second thoughts of whether you want to read this or not, I'd suggest you to go forward and definitely read it because it is worth your time. And I ended up rating it 4.25 stars. So now I'm going to dive into the spoilers and discuss all the spoilery details about this book with the people who have read it. So if you're a person who does not want to get spoiled for this book, this is your spoiler alert, just skip away from the video. Or if you want to continue on with the spoilers and discuss it with me, please do hang on because there is so much I want to discuss with you. Okay guys, now starting with these spoilers. I should say it took a little bit of time for me to get into the story and just start enjoying it because it has been so long since I read the first book for the first time. I think I read this first book way back in 2018 or 2019, so it's been easily 5 years since I read it. But once I got the groove of the series and got the rhythm in which the author has written the story, I just started enjoying it completely, okay? And one thing that I want to discuss before getting into the spoilers of the book is how this is very wrongly portrayed on BookTube and Bookstagram, okay? People just make this seem like there is a book which is full of sex, smut and horniness alone, while it is not at all like that. It is a new adult book and it has a little bit of steamy scenes here and there, but it is definitely not a book that needs to be sexualized to the extent that is being sexualized on BookTube and Bookstagram because it gives a really bad impression on the book if you ask me. I'm sure many people who like very subtle, slow-brewing romances with a little bit of steam here and there in their fantasy books could definitely go forward and enjoy this book. And more than anything, the writing of the author in this one is just like off the charts good, okay? A person who writes books just for the sake of, selling sex would not be able to write such a good story with such good prose in my personal opinion. I can see that, the steaminess of the book and the way in which it is hyped up on the internet acts as a selling point for the series, but I think it is way better than that and it does not have to sell just for that reason and just through that one reason alone. The author has written the first draft of this book in 5 weeks, okay? And the extent to which it has been polished by her and given muzzle to by her is just incredibly awesome. And I think just reducing it to the level of being sexy and smutty is disrespectful, so let's just not do that and try to appreciate the story along with all the other aspects too. And not just for the point of sex alone. First, I want to talk about Feyre, okay? Because the entire book just revolves around her alone. She's the only human being whom we care about and follow throughout the series. And that also becomes a really good point because we are able to see this world only through the view of Feyre because we are also human, she's also human. And everything that she sees and feels inside the fairy world is very close to the feelings that we might have as a person. And I think the author leveraged that point really beautifully inside the story. Many people say that Feyre is a very whiny character and she keeps on complaining continuously. And I think it is true, but it is not something that needs to be worried about also because she is a person who's super young, that is responsible for her family and doing everything that she can to take care of herself as well as the other 3 people in her family. And that is no easy thing, okay? It's going to take a huge toll on her physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and in each and every other way. So if she is a bit tightly wound and if she complains now and then because of that, I think it is totally understandable, and saying that as a dislikable characteristic of her is something which just feels super immature to me. And the other aspect about Feyre which I like is the way in which she just embraces whom she is as a person. She is very sexually active and she has very high sexual feelings, and the way in which she doesn't see that as evil or bad in any way is a really healthy representation of her character in this one, if you ask me. I have read a ton of YA books and new adult books in which either a female character or even a male character, while feeling these kind of sexual feelings, just makes themselves guilty and feel that what they are feeling is wrong. But at no point did I feel like Feyre was feeling that what she was feeling was wrong just because she had it. There are instances during which she feels like these feelings that arise within her are wrong, but that is not just because of the fact that she is feeling those emotions. It's because of the fact that she is feeling them for a fairy who's kind of the enemy for the human race as a whole. That aspect is understandable and fine, and the extent to which she is okay with acknowledging her emotions and just considers them to be normal really felt very progressive for me as writing a character in this series. So despite all the complaints and care for Feyre, I think I like her more because she just feels so human to me, and with all the hardships that have been attached to her life, I think certain ways in which she behaves is totally understandable and also super reasonable. Now, while I liked Feyre, I should say that I totally hated her family, okay? Because they don't have any right to just overrule her life totally, because she's the youngest of all the people in that house, and it is understandable that her father is disabled right now and he's not able to provide for his family, and he's also, not very happy about it. Though he does not try to provide for them in any way, it is not like he just gives away all his responsibility to this young person and makes her want to take care of all the 3 of them. The people who annoyed me the most than the father are the 2 elder sisters, okay? Though Nesta ends up being a lot helpful to Feyre in the last chunk of the series, and the way in which we see her love towards Feyre as a sibling reflected in that part, I don't think she's a nice person at all. And from what I read in the series, I think that's what people like about Nesta, because she's super honest and on the face with her emotions. Even though that's a nice quality trait, I don't think she's a nice person. Like, making your sibling go through all that shit just so you can be happy and comfortable is not something that I'd be okay with at all in any format or any media. And that's one of the big reasons why I felt like I totally hated this character and this family as a whole. It's just not okay, and people always ending up griping over Feyre but not acknowledging the fact that her family was like totally shit is something which kept on bugging me while I was reading this book. That's all I had to talk about the mortal life of Feyre. Now we'll just get into Prithian and see all those things that happen in there. And I also want to say that none of the things that I'm going to discuss further on is going to be in any chronological order. I'm just going to discuss it as it comes to me and as I have taken notes of it for the script of this video. So the first thing which comes to mind for me after getting into the fairy realm is the friendship that she develops with Lucien as well as Tamlin inside this place, okay? Because there is no other person who is allowed to speak and interact with her as much as Lucien and Tamlin are, and the way in which they develop this friendship banter over time and not just overnight felt really nice to me. Okay, each and every day when they have breakfast together, there's a huge difference from how they have it together for the first time and how it happens for the last time inside this book. The amount of comfort that they develop between each other, the way in which they care about each other, and how they just get along together as time passes by understanding each other and just accepting the person as they are, just felt really nice to me. Even though Lucien and Tamlin are like way older and like super ancient compared to Feyre, the extent to which they were able to trust her and tell her certain things that have not been said to any other human being, I think helped them to develop that proper bond of friendship between them. That friendship bond, as well as the fun things that we end up doing with friends, also ended up being kind of messy for Feyre because of the things that Lucien does. I like that aspect of the book too, because 2 times Feyre ends up getting into trouble because of Lucien. The first one is when she has decided to catch the tutorial and ask it some questions because of Lucien's advice, and how that ends up bringing trouble to her in the form of the Naga. And the second time is when Lucien ends up saving Feyre from the Canon My Festival, where Tamlin is totally horny and he is going to just take over Feyre if she is present there instead of any other fairy women. That felt like a very sexist ritual to me, but I could understand because she had to show the darkness of the Fae and the way in which this world was operating to us properly. So I think a particular chunk of the story that showed us the Canon My Festival and how the Fae just interact with each other despite the gender that they have felt kind of necessary, even though it was not totally right. Having said all these things, even though they are friends, I don't think Tamlin as well as Lucian treated Feyre in the proper way that she needs to be treated, because there are so many times during which they just do unexplainable things to her and they just resist to explain each and everything. There are reasons for it. Despite that, I don't think it is okay to just do all this stuff just because you cannot explain it to her. It just felt like a kind of escapism for me, using that curse as a reason. So even though this friendship is not perfect, it just felt very original and realistic to me, because each and every friendship and relationship that we have in our life is always kind of complicated, messy and complex also, right? I think that was reflected properly for us in this friendship banter inside the book. Now I talked about the Calanmai festival and how that added the darkness flavor for the book when it comes to the fairy aspect of the story. I also think the major curse element inside this book just leveled up the level of darkness that the fairy folk are capable of showing inside their own race. It was very twisted if you ask me, because the curse was put on Tamlin's court in such a way that they have to wear masks and they cannot tell the people why they are wearing the masks, and the only way in which this curse can be broken and the entire realm of Prythian can be free is only if a human girl who hates the fairies to her heart falls in love with Tamlin and accepts that she is in love with him. Even though Feyre is in love with Tamlin, it's not like she vocally accepts it and acknowledges it at any point until she clearly understands the curse, like towards the end of the book. And the way in which all the Fae folk are like locked up because of the curse by not being able to utter anything about it to Feyre was also something that was super twisted. It just added a lot of layers of complexity to the story and made us understand that there needs to be so much creativity for this main character, at least at some point, in order to understand all these things that are going on. At the same time, break the curse by using their wit and memory in some way. And it is not like just these main characters whom we focus on throughout the story, like Feyre, Tamlin, Lucian, Amarantha, Rhysand. These are not the only people who know about the curse. There are also other people who are not like high-ranking officials inside the fairyland, like Alice, who knows about the curse, but not to the exact extent to which it works. The curse is kind of vague, so it has a lot of intricacies that are going on, and the way in which it binds the people together without allowing them to utter certain stuff was really nice if you ask me, because those are the things which just show the amount of darkness that the Fae are capable of when they act in the way that Amarantha does. So that curse element, if you ask me, was definitely a top-notch element for this book. It's not like the most unique thing that I've seen in a book that deals with Fae, but it sure is something that has been properly utilized by the author. Next, I want to talk about one of the most loved characters, who's Rhysand. And there's also one important thing that I want to talk about Rhysand, which is the way in which he treats Feyre, okay? I hated the way in which she was treating Feyre from the beginning in which he appeared to her to the last scene, because there was not even a small instant during which it felt like he was empathizing with her at all. He was doing a lot of help for her and he was also literally saving her life at multiple points, but that does not give him the authority to just treat her like shit because she is human. And the way in which she ends up making this deal with Rhysand by accepting to live with him in the Night Court 1 week per month, and despite her having accepted and making that deal, he heals her and puts a mark on her hand, which just felt like super unnecessary and super abusive to me if you ask me. It's not like all the fairies inside the spring court were really good to her as well, but this just felt like, you're physically putting a mark on a person, which is going to remind them of what has happened to them each and every time they see it. So that just felt like super unnecessary and like very wrong to me in many places. Rhysand is just talked about to be like such a sexy character in the second book. I can understand, okay, the things that happen in the second book just make us feel like he's a really good character, but he has done such bad things to her, okay? Physically, he has done a really bad thing to her, which I don't think is talked about that much by any person if you ask me, and that is kind of disheartening also. Again, I can understand that he keeps on saving her each and every time, and one of the main reasons that Feyre ends up being alive at the end of the 3 trials is that she had the support of Rhysand throughout, but just because he's supporting her does not give him the authority to do anything that he wants with her. But he kept on doing it despite that, not giving reasons properly. So yeah, I personally think Rhysand is not that great a character in this first book at least. I talked a lot about the world building aspect of this book and how it deals with the history of the fairies, and that is a very bloody history, okay? I can understand why they are very dark, why they are very angry, and why they are doing all the stuff they are doing right now. But I can also see that none of the things that they are doing right now is something that can head towards peace at all. It can just make things worse for both the fairies as well as the human beings, because it's not like they are using their powers and knowledge in the proper direction, okay? There's just complete vengeance and this desire to seek revenge, especially from Amarantha and the people from Highburn, because Amarantha has actually lied and tricked all these high lords of the 7 courts and is keeping all of them under her control. And she's also having the ring with the eye of the man who actually ended up killing her sister, who was a high fae, after tricking her into falling in love with him. It felt like sweet justice and sweet revenge when I see it from Amarantha's point of view, but when you see it from the opposite person's point of view, it just feels like, like it's terrifying to see this person. It just feels like that world would be far better if Amarantha wasn't there. And the way in which she ends up hurting Feyre just because of the fact that she is human and she wants to torture Feyre, okay? Just because she's a human, she wants to torture Feyre as much as she can. And the extent to which she goes to do all those things, especially towards the climax where she breaks each and every bone in Feyre's body, it was like super brutal. It is super dark. It shows the ability of the Fae when it can be used to such a negative extent. At the same time, it shows Amarantha's character in specific more than just the powers of the Fae in that particular instant, if you ask me. So yeah, this is quite a dark book, and I don't think a person who is not able to stomach such brutal things will be able to digest all the things that are happening inside it. Keeping all those dark things aside for just a minute, I want to talk about all the experience that Feyre has after she enters and lives in the Spring Court, okay? The way in which all the people have been glamored from her side, and she has been thinking that she is sneaking around, trying to explore this place on her own, when she is actually being seen by like tens or even hundreds of fairies who are actually living there but not just visible to her eyes. It felt super hilarious to me. At the same time, it also made me feel bad for Feyre because I can understand how stupid and how much used she might have felt and how much embarrassed she must have felt after knowing that there was a glamour placed on her. So even though it comes at the cost of her embarrassment and her being sad, I think that was like a super hilarious part of the book. Again, there's a darkness to it too, and I think the author was just brilliant to add all of these layers and characteristics of the Fae, even when it comes to, such simple yet hilarious things inside this book. Now let's talk about the trials and the curse, okay? Before the curse, I want to talk about the trials, because the 3 trials that we see all seem like very much worth it, if you ask me. The first one is with the worm, and she is just one single person, and this worm is like, it's like the size of a lorry, and how she's going to defeat it was definitely kind of a huge question for me while I read it for the first time. But this time I knew that she was going to defeat it, and I knew and I remembered how she was going to defeat it also, so it was fun for me to read it the second time. The second task is to identify that particular jar or something which she has to open by like pulling a lever so that Lucien does not end up dying. And how the tattoo that Rhysand gave her after saving her from the infected wound that was given by the worm, and how the tattoo's power was used to save Lucien by making Feyre to pull the proper lever because she was not able to read all that stuff. All those things were just thought out really well in the previous few chapters so that they could all link finally to this one, and we could also link back this particular event to all those things that happened back then. And the last task, if you ask me, is the most brutal and most difficult of all, because Feyre has already killed a fairy and she is feeling so bad for it now itself. But despite that, she is also going to end up killing 3 other fairies, and the moment she kills 2 of them, the third one is going to be Tamlin. Everyone knew that's going to happen. And the racing thoughts that she has in her head, and the point at which she understands and clearly is sure that Tamlin's heart is actually made of stone, and just plunges the dagger into him with so much faith, and when it hits something hard, the amount of elation that she gets, it's just really nice. Amarantha, again, because of the vagueness of her words, tries to trick Feyre again, and at that point she gives away the answer for the curse after all the bones have been broken in her body. Tamlin is released, he kills Amarantha, everyone is free now, but Feyre is going to die. And let's just take a moment and see this curse, okay? Everyone, I am sure, after reading what that riddle was, have easily guessed that the answer for this riddle is love. If she had just said that, there's no need to spend all these shit trials 3 times and just getting this tattoo being, kind of connected with Rhysand and having to live with him. All these things could have been avoided if she just took a moment and said that easy answer of love, because all of us knew, okay, the answer for that riddle is love. Even a 5th grader could easily say that. So that just felt like super stupid and dumb to me. But finally, after all the bones are broken, the High Lords come together, give a piece of their power to her so that she also becomes a High Fae. And at the end, we'll see that Feyre itself has become a fairy, and not just a normal fairy, but a High Lord, and she's going to live in Prythian for the rest of her life. That's how the first book concludes for us, but there are also some open doors which are yet to be explored. One huge door being 1 week every month with Rhysand. We saw that Feyre did not like the fairies at all before she came to the Spring Court, but after spending time with Tamlin and Lucien, she started understanding them and liking them too. So the same thing can end up happening with Rhysand also in the Night Court, but we'll have to wait and see what is going to happen in A Court of Mist and Fury, which I'm super interested to read. And I'd like to conclude the discussion for A Court of Thorns and Roses with this point. So yes guys, that was my spoiler-free review and my spoiler-filled discussion for A Coat of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm definitely going to continue on with the series. I'm going to take a little bit of time for myself so that I can enjoy the series as a whole. I should say that rather than reading the book, sitting down and discussing it with you guys in front of this camera feels like a bit more fulfilling experience for me, because I think there is so much going on in the series that I'd like to discuss with so many people. So if you have read this book already, tell me down in the comments what you liked about it, what you did not like about it, whether you'll be continuing with the second book, or if you finished the entire series, tell me what I can expect from the second book without giving away any spoilers. And if you have not read the book, tell me if you're going to pick it up after watching this review, and tell me what makes you want to read it. And if you did enjoy watching today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. If you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.